Welcome, everyone. Thank you for taking the time to join us. And apologies for a delayed start. You know, we live with technology and life happens, right? So again, apologies and a warm welcome. I am Audra Mitchell, General Manager of the Massy Learning Institute, and your host for today's session. Around the world, many people were looking forward to the end of 2020 to signal the end of the COVID-19 pandemic and return to a life that we all knew and loved. Unfortunately, we are almost at the end of 2021 with no sign of the virus abating. In fact, some countries are on their third wave and yet others on their fifth. And many of us have been experiencing a myriad of feelings and emotions from fear, worry, anger, sadness, even helplessness. So today, with the help of our esteemed guests, we want to take a closer look at trauma and our emotional responses to it, especially during this pandemic period. So what is trauma? And how can we recognize if we experience it? What are the causes? What are the strategies that we can use to mitigate its impact and thereby build resilience? Well, to answer this and any other questions you may have, we invite you to spend the next hour with us and post your questions in the Q&A box, and we'll certainly get to them after the presentation. So without further ado, it is my pleasure to introduce our guest speaker, Mr. Hanif Benjamin, and I'll share a little bit about Mr. Benjamin. So Hanif is a clinical traumatologist and clinical therapist. He holds a certification in clinical traumatology from the Traumatology Institute of Canada and a certification in child trauma. He is the founder, president, and chief executive officer of the Center for Human Development Limited, with its subsidiaries, the Center for Human Development Postgraduate Training Institute, and the Center for Human Development Center for Change, a non-governmental organization. Through his love for learning and his firm belief to have learned and not share is to have never learned at all. He is a frequent guest speaker and contributor on local television and radio programs, as he's always eager to share his experiences with the field of social work and mental health. Mr. Benjamin also examines the major social and mental health issues, utilizing his social work, clinical, and trauma skills to explore practical, real-world solutions. This allows Mr. Benjamin a meaningful scope in influencing the lives of the many individuals, families, and communities he passionately serves. Hanif, a warm welcome. I now place our audience in your capable hands.
Thank you so much for having me today to delineate with you, but for a moment. So let me get right into it because I know we are a couple seconds behind. I want to start by defining trauma. And you're going to see some rat on your screen, and I know you're probably asking, but what rat has to do with anything about trauma? And quite significant, one of the greatest studies in relation to the impact of trauma on the human body, mind, and soul. And it was Panskep in 1998 who conducted an experiment using a family of rats, mother rat, father rat, and baby rat, or pups as they would call. And what is significant is this experiment was done over a 10-day period. So for the first 4 days, they were observed in their natural environment. And so what happened, you observe play. A lot of play was happening. The babies were up and down. For those of you who have young children or who have had young children, you know you can't sit still with them. And it was the same for the family of rat. On the 5th day, a stimuli was entered or placed in the environment. One strand of cat hair, one strand of cat hair. All play ceased. Every activity in that family, mother, father, and pups, ceased. But that is not the most significant part of this, ladies and gentlemen. The most significant part is after 24 hours, that strand of cat hair was removed. What is significant about this is that plane never got back to an iota of where it was before. Ladies and gentlemen, that is trauma on us. That is trauma. When a traumatic incident enters our being, our environment, it changes our trajectory, and as a result of which, we sometimes never catch ourselves again. And so it is important for us to understand why trauma and treating of trauma is so significant. Because without treating the trauma, our body keeps the score. Every single thing that we do reverberates around the traumatic incident. And everything that flows from us flows from a traumatic place. And so in the opening, what is significant about what was said is that in 2020, we expected this pandemic to be over, and 2021 we would be good. It was me who said on television in 2020, December, do not create false hope because you will cause further trauma to your being. Because you see, traumatic stress is something that alters our physical and emotional response to those things that we see as life-threatening. And COVID-19 for us, everyone, wherever you sit today, can consider or may have experienced life-threatening instances, whether it is your family members, somebody close to you, your child or children. Somebody would have experienced the onslaught of COVID-19. But even if you did not experience COVID-19 virus in itself, everything that reverberates around COVID-19 is also a traumatic stress. It means that what we see and what we do, how we do it, is impacted. It means that we see life from a very grim and dim place. It means that our hypervigilance, or in the Caribbean we call it jumpy. So we always jumpy, we're not sure, we overprotective, we don't want to go anywhere, isolation, all of these things start coming in. That is leading to what I call traumatic stress. So therefore, what is type 1 and type 2 trauma? Significant for what we are discussing today, type 1 trauma are those things that are unexpected, discrete, and immediate, like COVID-19. So COVID-19 came on us probably in March of 2020, just like that. I mean, we were hearing chatter, but we felt the impact of COVID-19 just like that. So that is a type 1 trauma. But what is significant about what we are discussing today is how the type 1 trauma manifested itself and morphed into a type 2 trauma. That is significant for us because type 2 traumas are expected but unavoidable ongoing experiences. So the COVID-19 started as this type 1 trauma, and just like that, we are nearing the end of 2021, and it has now been prolonged. 5th wave, 4th wave, Trinidad and Tobago is entering its 3rd wave, and wherever you sit throughout the region, you are going through your waves as well. So it means that the complexity of what this trauma is, this traumatic stress, that brings on all manner of post-traumatic stress disorder, depression, anxiety, and every other form of mental challenges because of what we are dealing with. More so, things that we may not understand or how to deal with. And so, what are the types of trauma you might be experiencing now? Acute trauma, a single traumatic event that is limited in time, That is what COVID-19 set out to be. Chronic trauma refers to the experiences of multiple traumatic events. The reason why I say that, because each and every one of us might be going through our own challenges, whether it is financial, spiritual, emotional, work, and even as a business, you might be going through your trauma as well. To keep employees or not, how much is too much and how little is too little. And so when people are being laid off, people are finding that permanent jobs are no longer permanent. Homeschooling, where parents are now having to take on the role of a teacher, where teachers have to take on the role of so many things. So the chronic trauma continues to step in and continues to rear its ugly head. We want you to come to work, but we understand that you have nobody to see about your child or children. So all of this leads to complex trauma, which is described both exposure to chronic and the impact of such exposure on you, the individual. So many of us are going through this complex trauma. And I like to talk about it like the purple onion. I don't know how many of you like to cook. And if you do cook, if you cook with the purple onion. And when you slice down that onion, ladies and gentlemen, you see the layers, the layers. That is trauma, layer upon layer upon layer. And because you are going through the acute trauma of COVID-19, all your other traumas are not taking a back seat. As a matter of fact, they are now competing. They are now competing for what it is. So when you examine the complexity of trauma, you must be paying attention to not only children and adolescents, adults, as well as the elderly, because trauma manifests itself quite differently in children and adolescents, in adult or middle-aged life, as well as the elderly. For our children and adolescents, might be irritable. They might be defiant depending on the age. The younger children might be throwing a lot of tantrums, you see. School might be a difficulty for a lot of our children right now because they're trying to make sense of this disaster that is COVID-19. They are also on the other end of the stick that might not be so clean when we, the adults, might be frustrated because we, the parents, are now being called upon to do teaching. And most of our people, some of our people are functionally literate. And so understanding chemistry and maths and all these things is a nuance to you. And so our children and adolescents might be going through their own depression. That depression and anxiety can come across as bad behavior. As a matter of fact, our children express themselves in two ways and two ways only, as a result of emotion or behaviors. And so we have to pay attention. We must be cognizant that what you see might not be bad behavior. What you see might be a difficulty in relation to their own psychological trauma that they are going through. And so the other thing that we must pay attention to, very critical, is our young adult, middle adult. And what this is saying is that for a lot of us, work and play might be an important factor. So it means that for some of us, we are no longer engaged in extracurricular activities. For men, going to sweat or play ball, football, basketball, cricket, and whatever other sport you might have been indulged in. We might not be able to lime or chill out the way we used to. A lot of us are now working from home. And for many, they cannot understand the concept of working from home. And so it is important for some of us, we need humans around us to get the creative juices flowing. And so that becomes a trauma in itself. And of course, if you are dealing with comorbidities, you are also quite worried. And of course, we have the elderly, a forgotten people. And the elderly in general, they don't like to bother people. They suffer in silence in the corner by themselves. And so we have to pay particular attention to elder depression. Those are real things. So what are the symptoms that you must pay attention to. You are looking at behavioral symptoms. You are talking about cognitive symptoms of the mind, physical symptoms, how you feel, and emotional difficulties. When I talk about behavior, you're talking about, did my behavior change? Did my child or elder parent behavior change? Am I thinking the same? Am I not thinking doom and gloom? Do I have problem concentrating? Do I have challenges understanding my work well and what is to be done? What about physical changes? People might be lethargic, they might be tired because of the depression and anxiety that they are going through. What about emotional difficulties? For many of us, we can't seem to understand our emotion and or how it is to move. Therefore, ladies and gentlemen, how do we self-care? How do we recharge for resiliency? Let's look at strategies for self-care as I walk you through the way in which we can begin to take care of ourselves. For many of us, juggling daily life has become traumatic in itself. I have met teachers who are now a teacher, a parent, a homemaker in one because they're working from home. Or their child is at home, but they must now be at work. So now you are juggling having to get somebody to take care of the children, having to get somebody to take care of your elder parent. Or you are a manager who have to be out at work, but you are also dealing with family issues. And or you might be an employee who are dealing with severe family challenges around COVID-19. So you are juggling a lot of stuff on a daily basis. You are up and down and across, can't seem to get it going. So then we have to ask ourselves, what is emotional well-being? Because without emotional well-being, ladies and gentlemen, we begin to examine stress. And the old adage is, stress is a killer. And it is. Many of my clients go to the doctor before they get to me, and the doctor said, we're not seeing any physiological challenges. But your head hurting, your back hurting, your foot hurting, your eye hurting, your head hurting, everything hurting. And you are running test after test after test. But what is recognized at the end of that? It is stress. Stress of not managing our emotional well-being by dealing with and juggling the daily life stressors. Ladies and gentlemen, that leads to burnout. And I am not talking about the burnout where a sleep will fix. I am speaking about a burnout where there is almost like an erosion of soul, where there is nothing you feel, where the love you had for your job has gone, where the love you had for your spouse and your children have gone, where the love you had for the things you enjoy disappeared. That is the burnout I am speaking about. When you are looking tired, when you are feeling tired, and it starts to manifest in the way you dress, it manifests in the way you are performing your job. You are a stellar employee, and all of a sudden, you are not coming to work on time. You are disheveled. You are not on top of your game. You have to be called in constantly. That is the kind of burnout that I am speaking about, ladies and gentlemen. One that keeps us always circling aimlessly. How do we begin to build this resiliency, ladies and gentlemen? How do we begin to figure out what is going on? Let's start by reflecting on your own experiences. Too often, we like to marry experiences. Well, Johnny did this and well, Sally did. No. Reflect on your own experience, ladies and gentlemen. It is yours and yours alone. No two person will ever experience trauma in the same. I remember when I responded to Dominica Erica Storm, and people were thinking, well, let's treat everybody the same because it was one hurricane, one storm. And I said, no, every single person will experience that storm differently. Every single person will speak a different story. That is why it is important for you to reflect on your own experiences, what it did for you, what it is doing for you, without feeling judged, without feeling pressured. You reflect on yours and yours alone. Because only when you understand what you have gone through, what you might be going through right now, only then can you begin to put things in place. That is a criticality. So the first step is reflect on your own experiences. Own it. Don't be ashamed of your experiences. We are all going through a difficult time. So there is no shame, there is no right or wrong way. But by reflecting, you begin to understand, you begin to know. We must begin to develop emotional intelligence. Emotional intelligence helps us to deal with the negative emotions coming out of trauma, coming out of the pandemic. Because we are all emotional beings, and every single thing that we do, ladies and gentlemen, derives from an emotion. So if we are not in control of our emotion, we make some seriously rash decisions. We make decisions that could reverberate an entire lifetime. And so becoming emotionally intelligent is going to be helpful as we navigate this ever-ending or never-ending pandemic. How do we deal with the people around us? How, as an employer, we deal with our employees? How, as an employee, we deal with our colleagues and our employer? How can we deal with our family, understanding that my emotions are all over the place? Right now, the question of vaccine or not a vaccine. Should my child be vaccinated? All of those are emotional responses that create fear, that instill fear in people. So becoming emotionally intelligent helps us to understand where we are, to accept what we are living in, and to create synergistic and logical approaches to our daily challenges as we face them. We will be able to manage the emotion as opposed to having our emotion manage us. That is the criticality of managing our emotion. Mindfulness. We are too busy for our own good. We are way too busy for our own good. So how many of you took a shower this morning? And when we start to have the conversation, you'll tell me, because right now people are looking like, what do you mean a shower? What we had this morning was a meeting. We were in the shower having a meeting. What I have to do today, when I have to do it, what do I have to do? Do I have to put on meet to cook later? Who do I have to meet with? We don't take a moment to enjoy the water cascading, or even if you're dipping from a dipper, a pail and bucket. We don't enjoy the scent of the soap or the shower gel. We don't feel the coldness or the warmth of the water. Sometimes we go in the shower and get ready without even paying attention to it. And we go through our day like that, thinking about down the road, tomorrow, the next step. Now, don't mistake mindfulness or being lack thereof of lack of planning now. But mindfulness is where you tell your brain to hold up, to become one, to identify the things around you, to enjoy the people, the space, the environment as best as you can. Those are the criticalities that you must come to. Mindfulness is something that is taught, it is utilized, it is something that you can build on. Mindfulness is something that you have to actually work, something that you have to develop. Mindfulness has a lot of activities. Mindfulness is something that if you practice, it can help you to regain your emotion. It is something that can help you be one. As a matter of fact, when your day is chaotic and you practice mindfulness, you deal with the trauma, you reduce your trauma. It helps you to understand and put the trauma into context. Those are the critical areas that mindfulness brings to you. Let's look at the multidimensional self-care model. Because self-care, people think it's just, yeah, just go and do my nails or do my face or go by the barber. Those things are important. But what I want to leave you with today is break down self-care into series or areas in your life. Your mind, you have to be specific with your mind. How do you take care of your mind? By being mindfulness. Emotion, by becoming emotionally intelligent. Spirit, by going to church or being one with your maker, whomever you see your maker as. Your body, taking care of your body, exercising, ensuring that your body is nourished in the way it should be, ensuring that your body get enough rest so that your mind would not be tired. Relationships, whether that is platonic, friends, and or sexual relationships, those are important to foster and to develop. And your work, you have to have a work-life balance. You have to ensure that your work is working with you and you working with your work. Those are criticalities that you must think. So I want you to, when you are examining wellness, I need for you to look at physical wellness. Am I physically well? If not, what do I need to do to become physically well? Emotional wellness. Am I emotionally well? If not, what do I need to do to become emotionally well? Intellectual and cognitive wellness. Am I keeping my brain active? Am I understanding? And if I am not, what do I need to do to become intellectually and cognitive well? How do I improve on my work? How do I move up in my work? How do I build spiritual wellness? You need to take stock. Am I spiritually well? And if not, what do I do? Social wellness is important. Even in the limitless or limited, social distancing, people are not going out. We still must develop social wellness because we are social beings. Occupational wellness. My work, is my work environment conducive to my wellness? If not, what can I do as an employer, as an employee? How can we have a conversation to synergize occupational wellness? You have to become cognizant. You have to become one with those areas. Don't just look at wellness as an overarching thing. No, break down wellness. Because when you begin to break it down, you are able to understand your trauma. You are able to see where your trauma is causing you the greatest stress. And so I want to leave you with this. I want you to remember to recognize signs of stress and to look after yourself. I want you to identify what you can and cannot change. But I want you to take control of the things that you can change. Put the effort and energy into the things that you can. The things that you cannot change, there is no need to put energy in there. Keep expectation realistic. You have to operate in the realm of reality, but you must also enjoy planning, but plan with reality. Make a deliberate plan to care for yourself. I will talk about it in the subsequent slide. Accept your limitation. Sometimes we want to be Superman and Superwoman, but we have to know how much we can do and how little we can do. You have to accept those limitations. This is a big one. Allow others to give to you, because sometimes we are so accustomed to giving to everyone. We don't know how to receive. And so sometimes it is important to just pause and receive. Find a reason to smile or laugh every single day. And I want to challenge each and every one of you to develop your own self-care action plan. Understand your trauma. Understand if you are going through a type 1 or a type 2. I want you to understand where you are failing in terms of self-care. And I want you to create a self-care plan that is specific to you. As a matter of fact, make it a family event. As a matter of fact, Massy should incorporate it as part of your wellness. Create a self-care action plan. How are we going to take care of our employees? how this manager will take care of this store or this area. How can you take care of yourself and your family? That is a criticality for us. And so I want to thank you, and I look forward to your questions.
You know, it's always such a pleasure to listen, to hear you, you know, when you always speak so passionately and share, you know, in terms of, you know, this topic, a very important topic, you know, so, you know, you shared so many thought-provoking insights. I mean, I certainly will, you know, you shared many things that I've taken notes of, but certainly when I go, you know, to have my shower, I certainly will make sure it's not a meeting, because you're right, you know, that's what we do. I know that really stood out, and I was like, wow, but so many things that you shared stood out. So I know our participants will probably have lots of questions for you. So I'm going to hand you over to our moderator now, Ms. Cherise Braffett, and she will be leading you through the Q&A segment. Cherise?
Thank you, Audra. Thank you, Mr. Benjamin. Good morning, everyone. Our first question is, what are the typical reactions to trauma?
So the reactions, if you go back to the slide, you will remember that there are cognitive, emotional, physical reactions. So you need to understand what reaction is happening at what point. So there might be a time where you might have an emotional reaction. For example, an employee crying, always always sulking, always in themselves, right? Or you can look at somebody who is just always spaced out. Or you can have a physical reaction, someone who might be responding in a way that is unusual to their characteristic, right? Whether it is a violent, loud, aggressive. So those are some of the areas. Or you also have cognitive reaction, where a person might not be sharp, they might not be in tune, they might not be seeing what's going on again. And that is also important for you to pay attention to.
Okay, thank you. Our next question is from an anonymous person, and it is, what is post-traumatic stress disorder? And is it common to experience this after a traumatic event?
PTSD or post-traumatic disorder, yes. However, only if you do not receive the necessary treatment. For example, PTSD or post-traumatic stress disorder it must happen 3 months post the traumatic incident, right? There are criterions that you must, for example, sleeping issues, you are re-experiencing the trauma and all of those things. Now the question is, we are almost 2 years into the pandemic. So is it safe to also say that many of us might in fact be dealing with post-traumatic stress disorder? Or in some instances, if you have not met the threshold for PTSD, you might be dealing with acute stress disorder. And acute stress disorder can be brought on by certain stressors in your environment. For example, Audrey might be going along good, you know, but then something happened and create a reverberation of the trauma that now brings her into what I call acute stress disorder. So yes, you can deal with PTSD after a traumatic incident.
Okay, thank you so much. Our next question is from another anonymous person. I realize that I am very anxious and I want to get away. Is this burnout? And how can I self-regulate?
So that can be along the lines of burnout. Now you would remember, and you would remember when I spoke about burnout, it is the erosion of soul, where every single thing becomes irritable to you. The wind blowing too much, you're bothered by the sun shining. Things that was normally happening in your family has now become an issue for you, where everything is irritating you. That is a sign that something is going on. It can be burnout or it can be something else, but something is going on and you need to pay attention to that as well.
Okay, thank you. Our next, well, we don't have a question, we have a comment, and it's from Jeff. And he says, no question, but kudos to Mr. Benjamin. It is indeed a privilege to have met him, and his experience and knowledge is highly regarded within my peers. His contributions in this sensitive area is definitely appreciated by all. Continue with the great work and vision.
Thank you, thank you, thank you, after God.
All right, and our next question is, how do you deal with unrealistic expectations on your job? Even though as an employee, your concerns would have been voiced, there is no change. And you are faced with feeling like a failure and feeling the effects on your mind and body.
I think it is important to engender open, fair, non-punitive conversations. I think that is something that we lack, and it's something that I'm encouraging people to do, especially in this pandemic time. We need to tackle issues from a humanistic perspective. We need to tackle issues from a humanistic perspective where we deal with the human first and everything that flows, because it is my mantra. A happy employee is a happy company. A happy company is a profitable company. So we want to make sure that people are okay. And it is important that we ask and we help people to become okay, whether it is in their personal sphere or their business sphere. Those are criticalities, and I think opening conversations are going to be critical for this purpose.
Okay, thank you. Our next question is, if you have been subjected to trauma after trauma in short periods of time, how do you recover when life continues to revolve as usual in other areas?
And that is the purple onion that I'm talking about, Cherise. You remember the purple onion? That is what I'm talking about, where layer upon layer upon layer, and it just seems as if you can't shake it. Sometimes you just want to be, you just want to stop and say like I've had enough. In times like this, I ask for the wedge of cognition. I ask that you take a pause. I ask that you begin to examine the things you can control and the things you cannot control. And I ask that you begin to put your focus in the things that you can control so that you can get a resemblance of some level of strength. And I also ask that you pause and seek the resiliency within you. Sometimes when we are dealing with the purple onion effect of trauma, it is hard for us to pay attention to the resiliency that I know we have. So the pause, the wedge of cognition helps us to take a minute to realize those cognition and to realize that you're doing the best that you can as well.
Okay, thank you. We have another question, and it's from Michael. How do you identify healthy work stress that stimulates your mind and challenges you to become better, instead of unhealthy work stress that is not in line with your personal standard and values?
I think it's simple. Healthy work stress is where you are still excited to come to work. You are still excited to challenge. I think healthy work stress moves us forward. It pushes us, it gives us the impetus to keep going, to challenge ourselves, to challenge our colleagues. That is healthy work stress. Now, on the latter end now, when it is unhealthy, you find yourself not motivated to come. You find yourself, everything now being a challenge. Things that you once enjoyed now become a challenge for you. When you're home, you are happy, but from the time you have to get ready to come to work, you are now dealing with emotions that you're trying to understand. You can't shake it. So that is how you could recognize it. The healthy work stress, positive, keeps you going, gives you the drive. The negative work stress pulls you away, kind of have you hidden. You don't want to really deal with this. I think it is easy to recognize sometimes because when you're outside of work, you are a different person. And when you're on work, you are a different person in a negative sense.
Okay, thank you. Our next question is centered around burnout. And in case the person may have missed it, we're going to ask it once again. How can we come back from burnout when the situations around us aren't changing? Example, work, home, etc.
Well, you remember I spoke about the taking charge of what you can control. Realistic expectations. Those are the things that I think will help a person who is dealing with burnout. Outside of what I've said already, I don't think there is anything more that I can add, but just recognize the source of your burnout. What is actually causing this burnout? How is this burnout affecting you? How were you before the burnout? Those are important things to recognize and to work on. And I think once you begin to do that, you'll be able to manage your burnout. But recognize the burnout first and foremost.
Okay, thank you. How can you tell if you are in the middle of a traumatic episode or experience?
I think again, changes in your behavior, your emotion are going to tell definitely that you are going through something. I think that's the simplest answer that I can give there. You know your baseline. You know what you give, what you take, and you need to now recognize when you are above or below that baseline. Meaning when your emotion has changed or when your behavior has changed. And most times somebody may recognize that ahead of you and say, hey, Hanif, something going on here, you know? So just recognize the change in your emotions and or behavior, and you will see that something definitely has changed in your social environment.
Okay, thank you. Our next question is, can you speak some more to the social wellness, especially in these times? What are some suggestions?
Well, social wellness is finding a way in this pandemic to continue to meet with the people that inject a level of happiness in your life as safely as possible. We are now living in an online world, and so I've encouraged people to develop online groups. You have some people doing book reading online. There are some people having cheese and wine online. There are some people having chess games online. Whatever you do, remain social with your group. Even as adolescent, I say, even if you are homeschooled, have Zoom homework session with their friends to chill and relax. You have to find ways safely as possible to continue to inject a level of social, healthy social interaction. And you can do that via online by using some of the creativity that I've seen and that I've advised over time.
Okay, thank you. We also have another similar question, and it is, how can parents help their children cope during this pandemic?
I think the biggest advice that I've been giving to parents is one advice. Listen. Listen, listen, listen. Listen to our children. Listen to them. I said earlier that children speak in two ways, through their emotion and through their behavior. We from the Caribbean, and we are sometimes too quick to pick up the punitive end of listening. Listen without judgment, listen without punitive sanctions. Just listen to your child. They too are going through a difficult time. Even more than us as an adult, we have coping mechanisms that we could utilize. They have not developed the level of coping mechanisms. And so my only advice today is listen to that child or children. Talk to them, allow them the latitude to speak to you about how they feel. And when they express how they feel, believe them. Believe them.
One more question, and it's from Michael. Any recommendations for practicing pausing in moments of overwhelming emotions? Sometimes when the overwhelming feeling comes, the urge to do more comes in strong, and the feeling to keep going is challenging to notice.
You have to listen. You see, mindfulness is one of the powerful tools. As a matter of fact, meditation and all those things is one of the oldest forms of therapeutic intervention known on this earth, millions of years ago. Mindfulness is a powerful tool. If we can control our mind in any significant way, we can control what flows in and out of our mind and body. So to deal with that, I'm asking people to begin mindfulness, to pause for a moment, to allow the mind to relax, to allow the mind to not wander. Mindfulness is a powerful tool. There are apps, there are things on YouTube that can help you to develop mindfulness. One of the things I know, we are surrounded by water, and the breeze and the sunshine can be very helpful in mindfulness. I know in some places the beaches are still closed, like for Trinidad and Tobago, so don't go to Galaha. But as far as possible, develop mindfulness. It will help you. It will cause a pause that you see.
Great, thank you. So our last question is, can you go over the two types of trauma and what are the symptoms seen in each one if they're different?
So type 1 trauma, so we have trauma 1 and trauma 2. Trauma 1 is immediate and sudden. The symptoms you will experience there is shock. Just like when somebody gets into a vehicular accident, you go through a level of shock and panic. So your behavior might be a bit skewed there because you are going through this level of shock. Trauma 2 is a prolonged trauma, for example, sexual abuse, domestic violence, and now COVID-19. So you kind of know that you are going through something difficult. So you have now depression and anxiety might be stepping in here. And that is the criticality to know. So type 1 trauma are those things that are immediate, and type 2 traumas are those things that are prolonged over time. The effects of type 1 trauma might be shock and panic, right? And the effect of type 2 trauma might be depression, anxiety, post-traumatic stress, and all the things like that.
Okay, thank you. We'll try to squeeze in one more. What can you do to help the breadwinner in the home who is just working to pay the bills?
That is a powerful question. Most of the breadwinner is a man. And there are different nuances if the breadwinner is also a woman. And so for a man, it is important to provide a level of support, because men generally are not emotional beings. They do not express how they feel. They do not express the challenges that they go through. So for you, the support will be to help that person to understand that they matter beyond the bread that they're winning. It is helpful to guide them to rest and relax as far as humanly possible. If the breadwinner is a woman, equally, there's going to be a lot of emotion that follows this. And so you equally need to support that person and say to them that they are loved, they are cared for. And there are times when we can step in to do the other things. So for me, for the men, provide emotional support. For the woman, create an environmental support. That way, both genders can now feel comforted that while they do what they need to do, they can be supported, whether it's via emotion or otherwise.
Okay, thank you so much, Mr. Benjamin. And that now closes our Q&A segment, and I will hand you back over to Audra.
Thank you so much, Cherise. Wow. Again, such powerful insights. I was here taking a lot of notes, such a powerful topic. And as we realize that, we've all been impacted by trauma at some point in time or the other, and we're all navigating this space. And, we have certainly gotten some great insights and strategies to help us on this journey. So on behalf of all of us from MLI, I wish to thank you, Hanif, for sharing your time and your expertise with us. This will certainly go a long way in helping us not only to better cope, but strategize in a manner that works for each of us. Remembering that, as you said, there is no one size fits all. So we all need to find strategies that suits us and suits our situation. I'd like to thank, as always, the MLI team and the tech team, and special thanks to Cherise, moderating us for the first time and doing such a wonderful job. So thank you, Cherise. Thank you to our attendees for your continued attendance and support for our webinars. Please note that our last webinar, final webinar for 2021, will take place on December the 8th. So look out for the advertisement for that session. And of course, continue to look out for our advertisements for other paid programs and services. Remember, keep safe, keep hopeful, and keep leveling up. Bye, everybody. Stay blessed.